So last week we talked about labels, stuff like that. Oh, we're live now. This is our take. Hey everybody, welcome to Unscripted. Emily is out for this week. She is out of town for, do I need to tell people what? No, why? Emily's not here. You probably could figure that out. So I'm with Corey Williams, our student ministry coordinator. So Corey, last week, Emily and I were talking about labels and how more and more labels are getting thrown onto people, which eventually just puts them in a box. And when we do that to other people, we never, or we restrict the ability to learn from them because they're just that label. We boil them down to that label. So Anyway, I was thinking, with having you on, like, how do you see that with teenagers and labels that they, collect?
Yeah, well, I think teenagers is an interesting topic, or maybe even young people in general, especially for the church, because I think it's really common for the church to view people under a certain age as all one demographic, right?
Yeah.
But we don't really do that with any other categories. Like, we can separate people by age, but when we get to it, we realize that all people are different. And I think the church makes that same error with young people, thinking that they're all, maybe justifiably so in some cases, but they're all like generally the same type of person. Or even in some cases that, they're the same as what we were when we were younger.
Right.
When you were 18 years old, probably a different type of 18-year-old than a current 18-year-old in our youth ministry.
Yeah.
And so I find that that's a really interesting balancing point. The church trying to figure out what the best way is to minister to a student that's 18 today without using some of those labeling type languages from when we were younger.
Yeah. A few years ago, there was an author who came out and talked about some studies that people had been doing with teenagers and, like the difference a generation ago or more, the label or identity that someone might have identified with, like jock or nerd, or, whatever those cliched ones are, that in today's culture, you've got teenagers who identify with all sorts of different labels and can kind of go back and forth depending on who they're interacting with.
Sure.
At school, you might be involved in band and identify with that, but also be on the basketball team or something like that, or, all those other different ways. And I find that fascinating that it seems like the millennial Generation Z, that they kind of function in that way, which is different.
Yeah. And I think it's even more significant when we just talk about the labels of, us as adults, or maybe people as parents. You have a teenager in your household now, right?
Almost. Yeah.
So, when we view our kids or kids of other people that are the age group that we're talking about here, we tend to label them in a specific way that's even like more condensed.
Yeah.
Where we'll say, well, they're just rebellious because they're a teenager. Or we'll say, well, they just don't understand because they're not old enough to understand.
Right.
In reality, though, I think that a lot of the times teenagers do understand a lot of the spiritual side of things than we give them credit for. And realistically, it's just a different way of talking about some of those faith aspects, those spirituality aspects. And that's still significant. That's still real to them. And it's our job as the church and as fellow believers to come meet them where they are and try to experience that with them.
Yeah.
And that's where I find a lot of value in ministry to people in that age group, for sure.
Well, and I think that when we, we as in people who aren't teenagers anymore, but when humans in general, we can label or criticize things that we don't understand. And so one of those things that I think is interesting right now is if you take 10 adults and ask them what their their opinion about TikTok is.
Sure.
You know, you might have some that are like, what did you just say? Did you know, they have no idea what it is. Then you've got some that are on it all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And then you've got some that are just adamantly opposed to it. TikTok didn't exist a generation ago, but
Right.
when you look at why people get on TikTok and whether they're creating videos or they're watching it, that sort of thing, those reasons are timeless. You know, people are wanting to express themselves creatively, or they're wanting to be entertained, you know, that sort of thing. So
Yeah.
I think when we take time to get to know people, whether they're 15 or 55 or whatever, those labels start to matter less to us because
Right.
they're a person.
Yeah, and the grand scheme of things, ministry is ministry, right? Talking to a person about faith, about spirituality, about their belief in Jesus or their perception of Jesus, whether we agree with it or disagree with it, that's still an important conversation to have.
Yeah.
Regardless of whether we think they're way off base or whether we just think that they're perceiving it a little differently. The important thing is that we have those conversations, because without them, we really just cannot do ministry.
Yeah.
And that's really why I'm do what I do. I know that's what you do too.
Yeah,
And
for
you
sure.
know, we're happy to be a part of it.
Yeah, very cool. Well,
Yeah.
thanks, Corey, for joining us for this week. Thank you for tuning in, and we'll see you next week. So take care.